Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Room, Pratidhwani's conversations with our creative community. And today, joining me in the Green Room is a dear friend, Sheeba Jacob, a singer-songwriter, and an actor, and that's really how we met first. Hi, Sheeba. Welcome to the Green Room. I do want to spend some time to just sort of walk through how you and I met and the forms of art you were practicing and performing then and the evolution since then. But first of all, let's just establish where you are. You are joining us from California. Where are you right now?
That's right. I'm based in Culver City, California, a part of Los Angeles, and a few blocks from Sony Studios.
Oh,
Yeah.
so is that close to like Hollywood or?
Not, like not too far from Hollywood, but it's its own little neighborhood.
Huh, cool. All
Yeah.
right. Well, excellent. Southern Cal. So are you away from the fires and all of that? How is that affecting you guys?
Away from the fires, the air quality a month ago, similar to Seattle and much of the West Coast, was pretty awful. But
Yeah.
yeah, now we're not experiencing some of the kind of more intense, just ramifications of this also. Yeah.
Good to hear. But all right, let's go back in time. So, 2013, we did a production of The Banyan Tree, and you were a part of the cast for that show. That is where we met. You in a capacity as an actor. Was that your first play? Was that your stage debut as an actor?
That was my first play. I think I did something in grade school, but yeah, that was definitely the first time I had to memorize lines of that kind
of. That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then a few years after that, 3 years or so after that, you decided to move out of Seattle, which I didn't approve of. I thought, we were losing good, talented people from town. But anyway, so but first you got married. You met this guy, Anay, and you got married, and then you decided to move to Africa, to Kenya.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, what inspired that? How did that come about?
Yeah, so a couple of months after the Banyan Tree play, I met this guy at a Halloween party, and
scary.
I know, literally the first night we talked about how we had both done work abroad in different respects, both living abroad, doing work in India, and then having this kind of identity as a global citizen and this like wanderlust for life. So I think as we got more serious, it was definitely like, all right, we are going to live abroad together at some point in our lives. And after we got married in 2016, it was the timing was right for us, as we just thought about like this is the right time before if we do have kids, if anything changes significantly, we don't own a home, let's just get out of here. And it was a big decision because I was in Seattle for a little under 7 years at that time. And
so you had roots.
Yeah, roots, major creative community, and we still felt this need or desire to go abroad and do some social impact work in a different capacity. So yeah, after we got married, we I think literally took a map out and started to cross out places like, where should we go? Where shouldn't we go? And so Kazakhstan was not on our top 10 list, but definitely Latin America and East Africa were. And that was because of connections or family we had in both locations, or because of the language or the love of the culture. And ultimately, we ended up choosing East Africa and Kenya as our place to move to. And yeah, that was.
So did you have family? Do you have family there? Is that what the ultimate driver was for East Africa?
So I have a brother currently living in Uganda. He's been living there for over a decade, and family who has lived in either East Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa for some of their time. And then Anai's mother grew up in South Africa. So we also got engaged in Tanzania. So like it had this kind of connection for us, and we just loved the culture out there and decided that felt like a right move for us. So that was where we headed.
All right. So so
Yeah.
so you're in Kenya, you're in Nairobi, and what did you guys do there? So you mentioned social impact work,
Yeah.
but what was that? Was that the day job? Like, was that what was paying the bills, or did you guys figure out other forms of employment so that you could do social impact work?
Yeah, great question. No, it was definitely paying the bills. It was definitely full-time work for both of us. I had started literally 2 days after we got off the plane in Kenya, and I worked at a girls' high school about 1 hour outside of Nairobi itself in a place called Tatu City, which is kind of set aside from coffee plantations in that area. Just this really beautiful kind of up and coming area
Hmm.
outside. And yeah, I worked as a dean of learning and instruction, and I got to coach teachers and develop these relationships with these amazing people I still consider to be my friends, and spent a year uh, deeply doing that. When I say deeply, would get up at 5 in the morning, get there by around 6:30, and get home by around 7 p.m. So I spent a lot of time, within the school and just learning. I think that learning curve was just straight up as I was like picking up Kiswahili here and there, and then
Hmm.
eating food with my colleagues every day at lunch where we got Kenyan food, and just picking up on the nuances of the culture that were just constant. It was this constant interaction and learning and growth for me. So yeah.
I don't know, I feel kind of silly to not realize this, but what did you do here before you left? Like, really what I'm asking is, did you have something in your background in your training that helped you become a dean of learning at a high school, or was this just I'm going to jump into the deep end of the pool and see what happens?
Great question. And yeah, so I'm a teacher by background.
Okay.
I started with teaching in Washington D.C., uh, taught in India, taught in New York, and then ended up in Seattle. And that's when I stopped actually teaching students and then doing work around curriculum development. And then the most recent job before going to Kenya was the connection to Kenya, but it was supporting school leaders across the United States. So traveling to places in Florida, Louisiana, and Washington, of course, and just supporting school districts with how do you give feedback effectively and how
Hmm.
do you support your teacher team. So that was part of the work. That was always, it's my kind of passion aside from creativity. That's always been like the heart of my work, or one
So
side of
you sort of knew going into this decision, or as you were making the decision to go to Kenya, that you were going to go work in education in whatever capacity or whatever opportunities were going to show themselves, yeah? And it sounds
That's
like
right.
you had that job lined up before you got on the plane.
Yeah. Ironically, though, we did choose the country before the job came,
Of
so
course.
the cards
Of
lined up
course.
right.
Yeah.
But yes, because of my boss at my job in Seattle, he connected me to this network out in Kenya. So it
All
was
right.
just this connection through educators and doing good
Excellent.
ed.
I'm split now. I'm torn. Do I want to ask about what was Anna doing, or really want to get deeper into the year of literally 12 hours a day at the school? So tell me very quickly, what was he doing to fill his time, and then let's talk about more what you were doing.
So Anai, for the first few months, was trying to just figure out, what were the great organizations out there in Kenya. They call it the Silicon Savannah of East
Hmm.
Africa. So like just a lot of innovation, and Nairobi itself is just this like, I don't know, cultural hotbed, like a lot going on within the city itself. And he landed on this job that does microfinance for folks. And so it's small loans anywhere from $5, $10 to someone who's setting up a flower shop on the side of the road, to someone who might need a little bit more of a significant loan. And it's based in 5 different countries. And he got involved in this kind of microfinance sector.
In what capacity? What was he doing for them?
He was the he oh I'm gonna mess this up. Is the VP of like marketing, and so he's basically working with all the country directors in Kenya, in India, in the Philippines, in Mexico, and supporting the teams to really develop and give the customers what they need and flourish. So
Excellent. So
yeah.
communication, marketing, PR, that type of stuff. Wow, cool. Okay, so back to you. So you wake up at 5 in the morning, you get out, an hour-long commute or whatever, you get to the school, you're there, like you come home at 7, so you leave at 6. So what were the school hours? Like obviously the students are there not the entire duration, right? So talk to us more about what was the crux of what you were doing.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is similar to like other developing countries, but this was a boarding school context. So
Okay.
it's kind of like you live and breathe boarding school, right?
Yeah.
And so you're shaking your head. You're probably familiar with that. Like
I
it's
mean,
like
just the idea that the kids actually are on campus all day. I'm
exactly.
recalibrating my perception of where
That's
what
right.
this place is. Yeah.
So as soon as they wake up, there are teachers literally there supporting them, in getting breakfast ready and, getting study hall sessions in the morning before classes start. And
Mm,
then classes end at, they begin at around 7:30 in the morning and they end around 3 p.m. But then there's a bunch of activities after and
sure.
either anything from supports with tutoring where teachers would work till 6 or a bunch of activities like soccer or art classes or music. So it was a whole range. And by the end, I was teaching a little bit of choir to some of
Mm.
the girls, so that was definitely keeping me there for that 6 p.m. deadline,
Yeah,
which
no
is
kidding.
so worth it.
Yeah. So you did this for a year.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
Then a funny thing happened, and I did. I'm like, how do you say this exactly? I did get pregnant, and
Shiva got
so
pregnant.
yeah,
Funny thing.
and
Huh.
and I think that was like a big decision to transition from the school, and focus on family, and so it was also part of the decision as we started to think more deeply about it to say do we stay in Kenya or do we relocate to the US? Which we could have done either because many friends who were expats were living in Kenya. Some had kids; they were doing it beautifully. I love the schools that I was seeing, so it was it wasn't an easy decision, but ultimately, and I had to travel so much back to the U.S. and other markets
Hmm.
that we were thinking, you know what, like it would be nice to be surrounded by family and be closer to home when the baby arrives.
Right.
And that, started our relocation. And the headquarters of his company is based out here in LA. And that's how we ended up here instead of
Because you could
Seattle.
have come back to Seattle,
I
and
know,
that would have been
I
the
know.
right choice. But okay, fine.
We could still Augusta.
There you go. Well done. Good recovery. Awesome. So then you end up in LA, and how long ago was that? Now you've been back for how many years?
So we've been back for a year.
For a year. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, a little over a year. We came at the end of May of 2019, and then my son was born on August 1st. So we had
Congratulations.
thank you, a little bit of time before, getting like finding an apartment, getting life set up here, and then getting ready for this huge life changing,
Yeah. Yeah.
experience.
And of course, I didn't know any of this, but I got an email from you, and I was like, "Wait, you're back in the U.S.?" I didn't know,
Right.
and it was because you were writing a short story, or you had already written a short story that you thought might play well on stage as a play, and then so we had
Right.
that conversation. So I knew you as an actor. I think at some point I discovered that because you were already a singer-songwriter back in 2013 as well.
Right.
Um, and so now you were becoming a writer, prose writer. What was bringing that about for you? What was happening in your creative field uh,
At
in
that
this time?
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was in Kenya and I had stopped working at the girls' high school, I was in my second trimester and I thought, okay, well, I'm here a few more months. I'm going to make the most of, what I can do creatively or however, like however this rolls out. I was open to
Mhm.
whatever kind of came. And I had applied to this fiction writing class taught by this woman, McKenna Onjurika. She's this she won this Kane award, and she's Kenyan. Beautiful stories, and so she was teaching this class It started in January of 2019. I lose my years, It's like what does time even mean anymore?
This
And
year is extra special in that way. Yeah.
and so there was 12 of us, and another super unique experience because it was one other Indian American, or actually, sorry, Sri Lankan American and myself, and then the rest were Kenyan writers. And so just reading entering worlds of like Kenya, like through this lens was just so, I don't know, like I feel like I was like a voyeur in a positive way, just seeing these stories. And so she pushed me because I was about to start writing children's stories because I had written some before. And she's like, why don't you just try like a regular, like a story for adults? And so I started to write, and what kind of evolved were stories that were either rooted in Kerala or some connection to it, but in America. And so I think there was something that was calling to me at that point. I had an uncle who was, my mom's eldest brother, who I was very close with, and he was just kind of our grandfather in many ways. And he had passed during that time. And I think I was like, how do I hold on to something, or my memories of traveling there? And what does this mean for our child who's not, what will his experiences be? So yeah, a bunch of stories came out about Kerala. And I think that was this creative kind of surprise for me, and this like really, I don't know, a really positive way just to get those written down and kind of honor that time and what I made sense of, and also give some creative flavor.
So this is happening, but at the same, so I'm going back to Africa. Sorry, this is no longer chronological, but was it also affecting your songwriting? Was it also affecting your music? Did you observe any changes in that?
Are you talking about like when I had that time in Kenya?
All of it, the stay in Kenya.
Yeah, sure. I didn't have a lot of time to be writing and doing creative stuff during that year. But I was starting to like here and there. That's kind of been my process also when I'm like working day job. Like it's like I'll get that song like at 6 a.m. before I go to work. And that's what would happen. There was like a few songs that kind of came from me, and then we started to like go to music concerts out in Nairobi. There was just like this flourishing music scene, so there was a few venues we would go to, and yeah, I started writing and made some connections with one in particular, like this wonderful musician, and we got to collaborate there too, and that was at the same time I was taking that writing class.
So I've heard bits and pieces of your music here and there, and to me it sounds closer to jazz than anything else. How do you describe your music to those of us who are not familiar with it?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's like sometimes you have to classify like who do you sound like, and
right,
I get a whole range of people telling me, they're like, you sound like Carole King or like Nora Jones, or
I was gonna say Nora Jones, yeah.
And yeah, so I think there is some jazz elements. I wasn't trained in jazz like formally, but I did do a lot of work in Seattle actually through this amazing teacher of mine, and then I would say like the writing piece, the just writing lyrics that are meaningful and express emotions that I may not be able to express like through just regular words. They come out somehow with the lyrics. So yeah, it's this mix of maybe sometimes it's like folksy, sometimes it's jazzy, sometimes it's just like a girl writing about like a feeling. So I don't know, it's like not necessarily classifiable at times, but I do love jazz chords. I do love kind of the history of jazz and the meaning of it. So it's like it's an honor when I can sometimes get something that sounds like a semblance of jazz music, and it gets me excited too, because I love that genre.
So is it just me, or would you agree that since you've been back though, you've been very prolific with music? Like there's been a lot of maybe it's just that I'm all of a sudden starting to pay attention to your Saturday Facebook Live events, but you've had a series of them. You've released a bunch of albums, including your first children's song album.
Yes.
So first let's talk about that actually. Clearly this is a product of being a mother and having an infant in the family, yes?
Totally. And yeah, my sister and I think Anai's sister have often said to me before Makai was born, like, you should write a children's album. You should totally. And I'm like, okay, that's cute. Like, and I get it. Like, we're kind of done with like Twinkle Twinkle, like it's mother. And when he was born, it was just not even on my mind at all. Like that wasn't a thought. And I was going through, like postpartum is just a whole layer of different kind of levels, I would say. And it can be, as I have conveyed before, like, there's blues that come with it. There is sadness, there's physical pain, there's so much. So I think for a few months there was just nothing coming from me. But I remember like a friend in particular who was visiting, who reminded me, like, she was sharing some music that her daughter was listening to, and she's like, you should be doing this. This sounds like you, and I was like, okay. And, a few other folks were like, yeah, like, think about that. And so I had taken the year off to take care of Makai. That was a commitment. I wasn't in a rush moving from a different country and trying to find work here in a hustle. Like, I wanted to be intentional about it. So I thought, okay, let's get this year. And that's another part of the conversation, what a year. But I don't know, there were just these moments where I started to kind of like observe things in goofy ways. And I was like, yes, like that's a teddy bear saying boppity boo. And like there's jelly beans and there's colors. And sometimes I would get inspired by like clothes I would put on him. And like thinking about even the Masai Mara, where we got to visit in Kenya, and like these animals we got to see. So yeah, these ideas just started to come to me, and little by little I had come up with several songs. Kind of, he was my muse in many ways.
Where does someone go and get these songs, Sheeba?
They are on Spotify under Sheeba Marie. The album's called Let the Magic In. And I think they can also be found on YouTube. I'll also say that this was very strategic time where he would be napping. And who knows, like, we didn't know how long the nap would be. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 40 in the beginning. And so I would like sneak to the keyboard and be like, all right, what's coming to me? So it was just interesting being in this kind of forced creativity. Like, I got to get this down, like, because I have an hour and this is like, this time. So it was interesting, feeling that in a way I haven't felt before.
Very, very cool. So, and then of course, that's not the only music that you're making right now. So what else, what does creativity look like in Viral Spiral in COVID times?
Yeah. Creativity, it's a good question. Like, since the pandemic started, I think it's just been this holding of so many emotions, which I'm like, that's new for me. Like, the ability to hold, and I think actually motherhood taught me this a little bit too, like even before the pandemic, but the ability to hold pain, hold grief, hold joy, hold, all the feelings. And I'm not saying I'm doing it well, but when I could like process certain things, it would take me a little bit of time. The start of the pandemic, or George Floyd's death, when those things hit, those were visceral, and I couldn't create anything. I didn't want to create anything. There was more kind of like that grief, I would say, is the feeling, or just sadness. But I think creativity then meant, like, after maybe a few weeks, or just conversations with people, or reading novels, or just taking time to kind of sit with this, whatever we call it, of 2020, like that's when the creativity came, because it was my way to kind of process in that like songwriting type of way, like what is happening, like what are we experiencing. And so two songs, The Little Things and then Persephone, were outcomes of just like trying to make sense of what was going on. And yeah, that was kind of the process.
And yeah, there definitely have been at least two phases to this whole thing, at least for me personally, and in some of the conversations that I've had. Remember the good old days when all we had to worry about was the virus? before George Floyd's murder, and just the conversation changed so much after that. Did you feel like there are two parts to the quarantine times?
Yeah, absolutely. And I demarcate it exactly by those dates. Like it was like March to the end of May, I think.
Yeah.
And then after this completely new shift, and I would say like even internally for me, March to end of May was quiet for me. I was watching him and I was working, intense hours. And so it was like just taking care of him, trying to make sense of things, like what's going on. And then I don't know, there was a complete energy shift for me after, like from beginning of June on. And that energy shift was like, okay, all right, so what does this mean? And so what is purpose in this life to impact these things going on both around America and around the world? And so it got me fired up in a way. I would say like the last year was quieter, which I appreciate, and this though was this like call to action of like, what does this mean? Like, what am I going to do in my next steps, for a career or art or whatever. So yeah, that was definitely a shift.
And did that translate into music as well?
It did translate into, I mean, that song that I wrote, Persephone, was definitely like kind of a making sense of, I would say, several of those months. And that was actually inspired because Subcontinental Drift in Seattle put that show on, and they were like, hey, do the theme of like, holy in October. And I was just trying to like make sense of like, what does hope look like in times of despair and uncertainty? Like what do we hold on to? Like, what do we have to remember? So I think that was like the driving force and the impetus. And like alongside the music was, I think, me like writing, and that's more like kind of reflecting and doing even just sketching. And I am not a artist, but like something about like getting just things on like sketch pads, like that just felt, I was like, okay, like there's something there evolving. But that was definitely like the impetus.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about, things that are happening here in the US and happening in the world. And I think the social justice cause, I mean, it is so much more American in its origin, not to say that there weren't Black Lives Matter marches across the world. There were.
Yeah.
But but that was a more US centric shift to the conversation that I think we were all having. COVID, on the other hand, just felt global. Like, I would talk to my parents once in a while, and it was like, I can't imagine any other, or do not remember any other period in time where the entire world is seeing slightly different versions of essentially the same problem. Oh, you're in shutdown, we're in shutdown. Oh, you can't go outside. Oh, you have the cops making sure you don't go out. Okay, we don't have that, but right, so slightly different versions, but my God, what a shared experience globally. Were you in touch with folks back in Kenya? Like, what is it like there?
Oh yeah, great question. And I love that thought. Like it was a shared experience. I think that's what like it felt like interconnected on that like cellular level. And I took this class. My friend who I used to work with in so there was a girls' school and a boys' school, and they were right side by side. Of course, they were right near each other. And he introduced me to this class that Jacqueline Novogratz, she does a lot of work, with social impact around the world. And she was doing this class where you had to form teams. And the idea was like, she wrote this book called Manifesto for a Moral Revolution, like big idea, right? And so the idea is like, meet with your team members once a week to discuss these like big ideas. And so we formed a team with this, the teachers from, teachers from Kenya. And so we got to have these really rich conversations, kind of what you're alluding to, like this shared experience, but also like, oh, wow, like you don't have access to, water right now here, or like you're having this issue. And we're having this issue as the protests were building up. And, it was just so interesting to keep in touch and see how folks are doing. I think, there is this like optimism that I adored when I was there, like people had. I know it's really, things around the world also are dicey with food insecurity and,
Sure. Supply chains are
just
messed up. Yeah.
right, right. So I think people are trying to keep their spirits up. Like they've gone to the digital learning model, of course, and I think slowly are starting to get back to face to face. But yeah, it certainly is. I think different conversations, and even when we would have our conversations, my reflections would often be about, well, in America we're like experiencing this right now, and they would
Right.
bring something so different up, from Kenya, and I was like, oh, right, because yes, this is so critical right now, but there's this world like, that is also like what's going on in Nigeria, for example, right now, or,
Right.
like around the world, like, and I hope we can like live both, as we get out of elections and get out of like this space, of the end of this year, and like like live with both like America and like, the rest
The
of the
world.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what a segue. What does the future look like, Shiva, for you? What comes next?
um, I'm slowly stepping back into the formal economy. I really like, I have such a respect for mothers right now who are like having to do both and of like taking care of children, trying to work.
Yeah.
And I mean, this felt like a job in itself, like in so many ways that, doesn't get valued by like the larger society, but like,
Yeah.
so that's why I say like formal and informal. But I'm stepping back into it, and yeah, I'm going to teach a course next winter quarter, actually at a university in Seattle. And I'm going to like, just, think about like ways I want to be really intentional about my next steps with the job search. And, that could mean going back to school, that could mean a lot of options, but creativity wise, like, I think it's just like continuing to like write when the spirit moves me in terms of music. That's really been, I mean, when I've come to my piano, like I'm feeling something, let me see like what I want to write and to sing. And then, yeah, I think like continuing working on this play is really fun for me. It's just such a new genre, and just developing my like creative craft and seeing where it goes in this. I think it's like 2013 since we did the play, and like, okay, what's next, like in this upcoming, next 10 years, or whatever chunk of time. So I'm open, but I want to be like intentional about like, yeah, and I am a creative and an educator, so I can do both and.
Yeah. Yeah. What a perfect way to think about it, because um, it is incredible, and I've been sort of observing this in my own workplace. Especially parents, especially mothers. They've always been a mother and an employee and a home caretaker or whatever else, but generally not all of those things at the same
Right.
time,
Right.
right? And so now all of a sudden they are their kid's mother and their teacher and their chef, and and still working full
Yeah,
time, all at the same time, and there's just no respite, there's just no break, and
that's right.
and it does take an enormous effort to get through that. So but hey, more power to you, and to the power of both and I don't know what university in Seattle it is that you're teaching, but I'll go talk to them and see what we can do to force them to have you come back to Seattle. This is the first hook that we will continue to
All
pull on.
right.
And I do very quickly want to mention, for those who may not be aware, that we did do a reading of your new play, one of the earlier drafts, with some Pratizoni actors a couple of months ago, and you're still working on it, and I'm expecting a new draft in a few days, and we'll read it and we'll keep working on it. So who knows, one of these days we might do a production of a Sheeba Jacob play here in Seattle, for which you will of course have to come over. All right, on that note, Sheeba, thank you so much for spending a little time with us, and thank you for joining me in the green room, the Pratizoni series of conversations with our creative community. So good to see you. Take care and say hello to the family.
Thank you, Augustia. Take
All right.
care.
Talk
All
to you
right.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.